Modica of Good News Ministries of GNM.org. And in this episode of Footsteps to Heaven, we begin a new series on knowing God's will and doing it well. And it's because of the book that I just published by the same title that these podcast interviews are inspired by. It's we're just providing as much help as we can to help you, the listener, to know what God's plan for your life is. And I'm excited today to be able to talk with and share with you Maria Gallagher, who has had a big change in her life thanks to figuring out God's will for her life. So she's going to share with you how this all happened. And we want to encourage you to see that God is speaking to you as well. So Maria is an author, an advocate, a speaker, and life coach from Pennsylvania. As a journalist, she received awards from the Associated Press, the Society of Professional Journalists, and the Cleveland Press Club. She is the author of 4 published books, all through Marian Press, which are available at shopmercy.org. That's shopmercy.org. By figuring out God's will for her life, she left her career as a secular journalist to become a full-time pro-life advocate. Maria, that's a big career jump. What motivated you to do that?
Well, I have to say it was the result of a whole lot of prayer, and I believe the intercession of the Blessed Mother that I made that change, and probably too the promptings of my mother in particular, who had often wondered how long I would really stay in journalism, because as a young woman in high school, she had been the student reporter for her local newspaper. And although she enjoyed writing, she didn't enjoy the atmosphere at the newspaper. And so she wondered how long I would last. I think I lasted a lot longer than she had predicted. But what happened was that at one point in my life, I decided to go on a retreat at my parents' parish. And this had a profound effect on me. And for the first time in a long time, I returned to the sacrament of reconciliation. And I felt so unburdened and so free after that. And subsequent to that, I began praying a rosary every single day. And that led me to become involved in the pro-life group at my parish. And I participated in a rosary procession at the local abortion facility in Columbus, Ohio. And that led to me becoming a sidewalk counselor, where I discussed resources and possibilities with women who were seeking abortion, that they might choose life for their children. And I decided that the more I became involved in the pro-life movement, that more joyful I was. And I felt that this was a real call in my life to become involved in the pro-life movement. But I found that to be incompatible with my job as a public radio reporter. And in public broadcasting, as in much of broadcasting, the Bible of the industry is something called the Associated Press Style Book. And that style book tells you how to refer to different issues and controversies. For instance, you cannot use the phrase pro-life in your reports. You have to say anti-abortion activists. You cannot say unborn child or unborn baby. You have to say fetus. And I became increasingly disenchanted with that censorship, basically, in my writing. And I think the tip-off came when a fellow journalist thought that I was really off the wall because I was reading a Catholic publication at my desk in my free time. He thought that was really radical. And I decided this is not the environment for me. I don't think it's radical to be reading Catholic publications. In fact, I think it's a very good thing. And I didn't appreciate the fact that I was being silenced a great deal in my reporting on the issue of abortion. And so I really didn't know where to turn. So I was at a Catholic Charities office, and they had a Catholic newspaper there. And I looked at the newspaper, and there was an advertisement for a legislative associate for Ohio Right to Life. They were seeking one. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that. So I went in for the interview, and they were very pleased that I had experience with the state legislature, having covered it for a number of years. And I knew many of the players in the General Assembly. And I also had a great heart for pro-life. So they hired me, and I did that for a while. And then the real act of God's will came in when I saw an ad for an education director at the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation. I decided to apply for that position, and I wasn't sure if I should actually take it when I was offered the job because my parents were in Ohio, my sister was in Ohio, and Ohio had been my home base. But then when I went in to tell my boss at Ohio Right to Life about the fact that I had this job opportunity in Pennsylvania, she said to me, well, I think you need to take it because your job is ending here. We can't afford you anymore. So that was my
Whoa,
clue that I
big
needed to,
clue.
that's right, that I needed to travel to Pennsylvania. So with a U-Haul trailer on the back of my car, I made the journey, and wouldn't you know it, as soon as I passed into Pennsylvania, I got a flat tire on the U-Haul trailer. So I had
Oh,
to call U-Haul and get a technician out to repair it. And I lost a day in terms of my traveling, but I soldiered on. I made the trip to Pennsylvania. That was more than 20 years ago. It was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, and I made it under the wisdom and guidance of the Holy Spirit.
wow. Two things that jumped out at me of what you mentioned that is typical for when we're trying to discern what God's plan for us is joy. The first thing you
Mhm.
mentioned was you felt joy that you didn't have in the secular journalism job,
Yes,
and you had a growing discomfort. It disturbed your spirit to be working there.
it did.
And that's certainly one of the ways God works in telling us, okay, time to make a change. And the other thing that stood out for me was when you said that when you went on that first interview, everything fell into place. I mean, all the experiences that you had helped you get that job, and that's one of the things that when God is calling us to do something, it's not out of a vacuum. He uses what we've done before. He uses the experiences we've gained. He uses the passion that we have. He uses the trials we've been through. Uh, he uses a lot of not only our gifts and talents, but our experiences, and nothing is ever wasted in the kingdom of God. And so your story is a really good example of that happening.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It was amazing to me how my skills as a journalist really helped me in terms of my pro-life advocacy. I was very comfortable with doing television interviews because I had been trained as a television journalist. I was very active in radio. And the funny thing was that I ended up getting radio shows as a pro-life advocate. And I now have my own podcast. I have Positively Pro-Life and I have Lifelines Radio. And I could never have imagined when I started off on this journey to pro-life advocacy that I would end up having my own radio broadcast. I mean, that was just blowing my mind. And God
Yeah,
did work it all out.
yes, yeah. Yeah, things fall into place for us. Sometimes he gives me an understanding of where he wants me to go, and it could take years before I get there. And I'm like, what?
Yes.
but yet things do fall into place when the time is right, and that's a sign that God is opening the door for it.
Hmm.
So yeah, what what were your difficulties that you faced in making, no big change comes easy. I mean,
Right.
you mentioned, leaving your family behind. Was there anything else that you had to struggle with?
Well, I had to struggle with the fact that I was on my own. The only people I knew in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the time I moved here were the 8 people who worked for the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation. So it was a little bit lonely, but quickly I adjusted to living in Harrisburg. And I made a Curcio weekend, and that changed my life. And it gave me great prayer support and great practical support from the ladies that I made the Curcio with. So God had it all under control. I mean, He provided me with the support network I needed. I was a single mother at that time because my marriage was being annulled, and I had a little daughter, and I needed help with her. And lo and behold, so many people came to my rescue, and I'm very grateful for that. And it just shows that God does show up in the most challenging circumstances. And I wouldn't say that it was easy making the transition from journalism to pro-life advocacy, but it certainly was worth the effort. And I had to adjust my thinking in terms of being open to constructive feedback and being open to being challenged. Because as a journalist, I really had control over the situation. I had control over the mic. I did my own editing. So I didn't really encounter much resistance to my reports. But here, as a pro-life advocate, I encounter resistance every single day. And it comes from all different places. And so I have to be strong. And I draw my strength from God. I could not do this without Him. There's not one day that goes by that I don't seek His counsel and His wisdom, because it's absolutely necessary for this fight that we have, a peaceful, prayerful fight to restore a culture of life in our Commonwealth and in our country. And I just feel so privileged that God gave me this responsibility. And growing up, I never would have imagined that I would be doing something like this. It was not on my radar. My parents were not involved in the pro-life movement. My sister was not involved. But I do believe that I was born for this work.
You mentioned relying, getting your strength from God. You know,
Yes.
if someone were listening to this were to say, so I try to rely on God's strength, but I'm still feeling the suffering, the struggle, the weakness. I don't feel qualified to do what I think God might be asking me to do. What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that you should take a lesson from Mother Angelica, who said that I think she said something to the effect that when you go out in faith, that you do have a queasy feeling in your stomach. And I have that feeling all the time. But that doesn't stop me because I believe so strongly in the goodness of our cause and that this is God ordained. And so I just rely on Him. And I don't worry about the resistance that I face. I don't worry about the challenges because I know that God is in control and He is going to help me. And even if I struggle, He's there in the moment for me. So I don't have to rely on my own strength. I rely on His, and that will see me through.
Tell me about your prayer life. What do you do to help you hear from God more clearly?
I devote myself to weekly adoration before the Blessed Sacrament in our local adoration chapel. And that has given me so much comfort and guidance over the years. I believe that that is what led me to start writing books during the pandemic. And I really draw a great deal of support from that time that I have before Jesus. And it's such sacred time. It's my Sunday afternoon date with Jesus. And I try to make sure that I keep that date every single week. And that brought me through a great number of challenges. For instance, when my father became ill and ultimately died, I was going to the adoration chapel every week during his illness. And that gave me a lot of sustenance for that difficult period of time. The same thing held true when my mother became ill and ultimately died. I was there before the Blessed Sacrament all the time, asking for help from Jesus because I couldn't do it alone. My parents were such great role models for me and provided such loving care to me. And it was so hard to let go of them. But I know that they're in a better place. And I get that idea from my prayer life and from what I feel as if I'm hearing from God through that. And I also do a daily rosary and I do a daily Divine Mercy Chaplet. And then the other thing that I like to do is an examine. So I go through my day each evening and figure out what were the blessings of the day, what were the challenges, how could I have done better, where did I draw strength from God, and what should I do the following day to draw even closer to Jesus. And that examine really helps me. It grounds me and it gives me the courage I need to go on.
That's beautiful. That's a well-rounded prayer life.
Thank you.
Um, so yeah, the pro-life movement, what have you seen change over the years? Is it are there more people involved or less? Is there fewer abortions because of it? What's your viewpoint on that?
So there have been a lot of changes in the pro-life movement over the years. I think technology has been the biggest change. We have 4D ultrasounds now, so we can see the baby not only smiling in the womb, but laughing in the womb. And I know when I had the ultrasound of my daughter, it showed her playing with her toes. And that made her very human to me and helped to form the bond that we shared. So technology is crucial in the fight against abortion. I think social media can have a tremendous impact. I think posting those ultrasound pictures on your Facebook feed and on your Instagram feed can certainly help. And all the beautiful memes that are out there about the beauty of unborn life and the wisdom of basically protecting that life and cherishing that life. I think that's helpful as well. We have seen a fluctuation in terms of abortions. We saw that the abortion numbers went down in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. They've begun to climb again because of the advent of the abortion drug, mifepristone. And that is very concerning, especially the fact that a number of women are getting these drugs through the mail. They have to deal individually and all by themselves with the fallout from these abortions. They may find it very difficult seeing the dead body of their son or daughter, but that is what happens when they take the abortion drug. And they may find that they have a sense of real trauma going into their bathrooms or going into their dorm rooms because they remember that terrible image of their dead baby. And so it's very important that we continue to work to try to eliminate these mail order abortions, which are so dangerous. Uh, they're lethal for the babies, obviously, and they also can cause tremendous damage to the mothers. We see a rise in ER visits, a rise in hemorrhaging, all sorts of complications from the abortion drug, and it needs to be stopped. And so I encourage people, please, first of all, pray for an end to abortion. Second of all, get involved in your local parish pro-life group. If there isn't one at your parish, ask your pastor if you can start one and become involved in local pro-life groups that accept people of all different faiths, and become knowledgeable about the pro-life issue. Subscribe to lifenews.com and Live Action and various publications such as National Right to Life News Today, which I write for. You're going to become aware of the impact that the pro-life movement is having, and you're going to become energized and feel a sense of accomplishment for what you do in the pro-life movement.
What are some of these? So let's say someone listening to you right now is uh it's trying to figure out what God's plan for them is. They don't feel comfortable, and they know there needs to be a change in the work that they are doing, the places that they are spending their time. And you know, for those who have some inkling of a stirring inside themselves as they listen to you talk about being involved in the pro-life movement, what would you recommend that they do to help figure out if that is, I mean, as wonderful as it is, not everybody's called to that. There,
Mhm.
people need to be called to other things because there's a lot that needs to be taken care of.
Yes.
So other than having a passion that says, oh, that's such an important ministry, how would you recommend that they uh, hear God better? You know,
Mhm.
what can they do to be more in touch with what God is planning for them and trying to point them towards?
I think the key factor is to seek out quiet and solitude. And I think you can just take maybe 5 or 10 minutes and just unload on God. Tell God what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what's going through your mind, and ask Him to give you some direction in your life, to tell you what it is that He has planned for your life. And just sit back and relax, and you may see doors opening that you never thought would open as a result of that prayer. And what I find helpful is to go to prayer with a notebook and a pen, and I pray to God, God, what are you telling me today? And then I sit with the notebook and pen, and I write out what comes into my mind. And I am often surprised and pleasantly so by what transpires on that page. And so that's a way that I find can be helpful in terms of discerning God's will. The other thing is to seek out wise counsel from people who know and love you. Ask them, what do you see in me? Where do you see me headed? What do you think might be the best direction for my life? And they may affirm what you've been thinking all along about the change that you would like to make.
Yeah, community is very, very important. God
Yes.
made us to need community. I mean, God is a community. Three persons in one is a
Right.
community. And that's why we fit better, feel better, belonging in a family and belonging in a parish, and wherever we're belonging, wherever we can belong with like-minded people, and that itself is a communication with God because He speaks through the people around us.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, it's really good to ask people for feedback, and you know take somebody out to lunch and
Hmm.
say, I don't like what I'm doing with my life right now. I don't like this job I'm in. I'm finding it difficult though to figure out how to get from this paid job to this other area of my life, which is so filled with the unknown.
Yes.
And uh, so there's a way that we can ask our friends for feedbacks, like, what do you see in me that God is doing? What are my gifts and talents? Now, one thing that we need to remember when people talk about these positive things about us is we often have a hard time accepting compliments, and so we need to realize that when somebody says you're really good at listening to me when I have a problem, for example, uh, it's like instead of saying, "Oh, no, no," it's like, "Thank you, yeah, thank you for pointing that out." Realizing that, of course, that gift of listening comes from God. So when we accept compliments, we are praising God, and we're allowing that friend to praise God at the same time because they're acknowledging a gift that God has given us, even if they don't know God and they tell you, it's like, you're a good listener. God is speaking through that. And sometimes it takes a while to put all the pieces together. I like what you mentioned about journaling. Anytime somebody is in the discernment process, journaling is very, very helpful. My favorite recommendation for how to journal is to start it out, Dear Jesus, or Dear Father God, and or Dear Holy Spirit. And here's what I didn't like about what happened today at work, and or what in my parish, or something. And because it's those uncomfortable areas where the Lord is saying, okay, you may have been comfortable before, but you're not going to be comfortable now because I'm pushing you to get out of that seat and start something new, get involved in something new. But that new, we need to be patient because that new can take a while. Things do fall into place when it's time, but uh, God's perfect timing is not always what we think it should be. And so we need to just hang in there, keep the prayer life going, keep the journaling going, and keep talking to people, and it really does help to get feedback from other people. And then when you're thinking, well, I'm thinking about I really feel passionate about the pro-life movement, but I have no idea how to earn money from that. I can't give up this job unless I'm earning money in something new. And so there's that part of where is God leading me, where he's also protecting me, where he's also supplying and being my provider. And I think that can be one of the hardest parts of the discernment. Did you deal with that struggle at all?
I did because when I initially took this job in Pennsylvania, it was not covering all my bills. So I had to take a part-time job at a retail store as a cashier. But I still felt that I was called to the pro-life movement, and God has always provided. And in fact, my boss for many years, Michael Chicachopo at the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, left a very lucrative career as a hospital administrator to come work for us at a significant pay cut. And he had a family to support. And yet he tells people he never missed a meal. Everything worked out fine. He's now living his best life in retirement, and the Lord took care of him. So you'd be amazed at the ways that God can provide for you once you decide to follow his will for your life. It may not be the way that you would want, but it takes care of the bills. So you have to accept that gratefully. And sometimes I've relied on other people who were basically acting as my patrons for my work. And that was a humbling experience, but it showed me the value of the work and the fact that it was necessary to do and that I had to continue on this path, even though it was a bit rocky at times. And that has stood me through more than 20 years at my job. And I really love my job. I just cherish my coworkers so much. I cherish all the people that I know from our county-based chapters throughout Pennsylvania. and it's just a good fit. And over the years, I've wondered sometimes, well, should I go into this line of work or that line of work? And God always brings me back and says, no, this is your work. And in fact, my pastor said to me this past week, your work will never end. And I truly believe that's the case because even though we have some victories in the pro-life movement, we also have challenges ahead. And so there will always be a need for the pro-life movement, sadly, but joyfully, we can serve that need with a servant's heart and with the knowledge that God is looking out for all of us.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. And I do believe it's going to inspire people who will listen to this podcast. What are the books that you have published?
So, my first book was called Joyful Encounters with Mary. And it was based on my belief that the source of joy in my life was my relationship with the Blessed Mother. And I also thought that we live out the mysteries of the Rosary, the joyful mysteries, through our lives. I mean, a lot of us have been mothers, so we've experienced pregnancy and the birth of a child. We've helped pregnant women, like Mary helped Elizabeth. We've had the unfortunate situation where we've lost a child temporarily, like Mary lost Jesus in the temple. Um, and so we can find that bond with Mary. So that was my first book. My second book was a pro-life book called Mercy's Power, and it was a guide to living out the pro-life movement or the pro-life cause in your own life where you are. It was kind of a spiritual guidebook and a practical handbook for the pro-life movement. My third book was Glorious Encounters with Mary, which was based on the glorious mysteries of the Rosary. And then my fourth book was Healing Encounters with Mary, which was based on the sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary. And I am now working on Luminous Encounters with Mary, which we hope will be published in August.
Wonderful, beautiful. And where can people find your books?
Yes, they can find them at shopmercy.org. That's shopmercy.org. That's Marian Press. And they do a phenomenal job with their publishing. So I highly recommend all their books, but you can find mine in particular at that website.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. And I want to mention again to everyone that that this podcast series is part of my ministry of helping people find God's plan. I've got back here, that's the book Knowing God's Will and Doing It Well. And it's a workbook. It has pages with questions and space to fill it out. There's some uh, self-assessment tests to take in at the end of it. And so I just want to recommend that to everybody. And Maria, I am so glad that you said yes to coming on to this podcast show. And I ask God to bless you profoundly in the continuation of your ministry in the pro-life movement. Thank you very much for what you do.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, bye for now. God bless.